On today's lecture, we're going to talk about the management of reproduction in a beef herd and how that can impact the wallet, right? It is important for us to understand that reproduction can impact our profits and can either keep us in business or take us out of business if we're not ready. Beef producers often consider reproductive efficiency as the number of cows they calve each year. But we got to think ourselves, what do we want? Right? What's more important for us? Do we want a heavy calf that is dead? Or do we want a lightweight calf? Right? Lightweight calf that is alive. Something that it's live. We can take, feed, manage, and be able to either get some profit out of that animal, whether that's at weaning, whether that's at finishing, right? If we retain full ownership of that animal. So it is very important for us to decide what's our management style. Do we want to produce heavy calves? Do we want to produce lightweight calves? It all depends on what your desire is. Some producers aim to be able to produce an optimum amount of live calves. So in this case, they care more about the number of head that are grazing on their pastures than the weight of the calves that are grazing on the pastures. It all depends on how much grass you have. It all depends how much land you have and what's your optimum goal. Are you selling weaned calves or are you retaining ownership maybe through a backgrounding operation, grazing operation, or are you selling them at finishing for slaughter? The entire beef industry requires an integrated system approach. Focus on selecting and developing breeding stock that can produce us 1 cow per year, meaning that our objective is to, as beef producers, is to produce 1 live calf per cow per year that can be weaned, right? If it's weaned, it's going to produce, and it's going to give us some monetary value that are going to keep us in business. However, reproduction of cows is not managed individually, but is managed as a herd. So the economic evaluation of the total herd reproductive performance, it is the most critical in any operation. Reproductive efficiency is considered one of the most important economic factors in cattle production. It is measured by the number of calves born and weaned each year per 100 females in a breeding herd. The actual number is the cows that calve each year divided by the number of cows that were exposed to a bull the year prior. This is what we call our exposed cow inventory, because we know that reproduction is at least twice as important to profitability as growth in carcass is for a cow-calf producer who sells their calves at weaning. Therefore, we have to understand our reproductive cycle, right? We got to understand our breeding management. We have to know what time, what weight, what kind of cattle are we breeding? Are there early maturing cattle? Are there heifers? Are there cows? Right? All that comes into play. What is their body condition score? So breeding management is important. Then we got to understand what sort of production system are we going to follow? A reproduction system are we going to follow? Are we going to do artificial insemination? Right? Are we going to do natural conception using a bull? AI can be good, it could be bad. It all depends on how you have it all set up. It is good to be able to prevent reproductive diseases, right? That could be introduced by a bull. But at the same time, if you're not good at artificial insemination, your pregnancy rate can be drastically reduced. Or gestational management. Are our cows going to have sufficient food to be able to carry the pregnancy, right? Is it going to be a cold winter? Do they have enough hay? Are they going to be provided with some vitamins and minerals? Vitamins and minerals are important for our cows to be able to carry a reproductive life cycle. Then we got to understand our calving rate, right? When those cows calve, we got to understand, where are we doing this? Are we doing it in an open pasture? Do we have a way to bring them closer to a heating source, somewhere where it's dry, where it's not muddy, right? You can have a great amount of cows that calve, but you might not have a great amount of cows that wean. Why do I say that? You can have a calf that gets stuck in the mud that will basically reduce your number of wean calves. So your profitability there is already reduced. So understanding calving management is important, right? We have to be able to provide a substantial amount of labor in order for us to maximize our profitabilities. I understand that our goal as producers is to provide the least amount of labor and allow the cows to do that. And that's okay. And we do that by selecting the right genes, right? The right genetics. Something that has calving ease, low birth weight, cow that has a larger frame that is able to produce some calves without any problems. So basically, sire and dam selection is very important. But at the same time, management of our calving pens is important. The perinatal survival rate is also important. Do we have to dip the navel? Is there some sort of vitamins that we can provide that calf? Are we going to watch that calf and make sure that calf nurses within the first 2 to 3 hours of being born, right? We have to make sure that calf consumes colostrum to be able to start a healthy gut microbiome that can take this calf and be able to wean a heavier animal later on in life, right? So that post-calving management, when the cows are going to go to weaning, if we have a bull calf, are we going to cut him? At what age are we going to cut him? How early, right? How early? We want to make sure we cut him early enough that we can either determine how we're going to manage that animal, whether it's going to go for a stocking operation or we're going to go straight into a basically feed operation and put feed in front of it to finish him earlier on. Our weaning rates, right? What kind of management are we going to do there? Are we going to wean, do a fence line weaning? Are we going to do a truck weaning where we put him on a truck and take him right away? Are we going to put the rings on the nose to be able to prevent suckling? So weaning management, the weaning rate also can be affected. And that's also going to impact our breeding management again, as we have to be able to separate those cows to be able to get them bred again, maintain another pregnancy as we go through. Part of knowing the reproductive cycle of cattle is be able to understand the reproductive organs, specifically the organs of the cow. If you're looking at this figure, it shows the reproductive organs of the cow and their location in the body. Right? The reproductive organs consist of a pair of ovaries that is suspended by a ligament just behind the kidneys. As you can see here, right? Here are the ovaries and a pair of funnel-shaped tubes known as infundibulums. Right, so this is the funnel-shaped tubes right here, and this is what we consider the infundibulum. This is very important, and we'll talk a little more as we go through it. These are part of the oviducts that lead directly into the uterine horns. Right, so basically, this is the infundibulum, parts of the oviduct. We're going to follow it all the way through until we get to the uterine horn. Right. So basically, it's going to come down around, and it's going to get to the uterine horn, which is this sort of teal kind of color area right here. The two uterine horns merge together to form the uterine body. And so the uterine body is where we are going to carry the pregnancy. So we know that the ovaries are important for reproduction, right? They produce the eggs, the female sex cells, or also known as ovas. They also produce hormones. Each egg or ovum is individually generated by follicles within the ovary. All follicles that a female will ever produce are present at birth as an immature follicle. So as we move forward to the next picture, basically these are what we consider our follicles, right? And all the eggs that are potentially, or that could potentially ovulate and lead to a pregnancy are already present on a cow at birth. The majority of these follicles, so a little over 99% of them, will grow into various stages, meaning they will start all the way from here, go to primary follicle, secondary, tertiary, and depending on the health of the animal, the age of the animal, they will deteriorate or they will cease growth and be reabsorbed or absorbed back by the uterine body here, or the ovary in this case. Less than 1% of the follicles will mature into what we call Graafian follicles that will reach a maximum size of about 0.4 inches in diameter, right? They will, only less than 1% will get to this. And then they will lead to what we call ovulation. During this ovulation, the egg is released from the mature follicle and it develops into a yellow body or corpus luteum, right? Which becomes a virtually important structure in pregnancy occurrence. The egg that is released will exit the ovary, go into the infundibulum, travel to the oviduct, right? It is here that the spermatozoa will pass through the uterus to the upper ends of the oviducts to intercept and fertilize the ovum or the egg. The fertilized ovum will travel to the uterus to develop into a fetus and will implant itself into the uterine wall and placenta and remain in the uterus until parturition. Ovarian hormones, progesterone and estrogen, fluctuate during the estrous cycle in the mature heifer or cow. Estrogen is produced by the follicle in response to follicle-stimulating hormone, mostly known as FSH, that is produced from the anterior pituitary. FSH stimulates follicular development on the ovary and thus production of estrogen. The increased levels of estrogen in the bloodstream stimulates the female to display behavioral estrus. Another hormone that is produced is luteinizing hormone, or LH. It is produced by the same cell of the anterior pituitary that produces FSH. For the most part, luteinizing hormone, or LH, and FSH levels are parallel one another in the bloodstream through the estrous cycle. The functions, or the three primary functions of luteinizing hormones, are to stimulate ovulation of a properly developed follicle during estrus. The second one is to control the formation of the corpus luteum. And the third one is to stimulate progesterone production from the luteal cells of the corpus luteum. The ovarian hormones, estrogen and progesterone, feed back to control LH and FSH production or secretion by controlling gonadotropin releasing hormone, or GnRH, from the hypothalamus. As seen in these two figures, you can determine when ovulation is occurring, the development of the corpus luteum, right, or the development of a follicle prior to ovulation again, right? So progression of a corpus luteum here, same as basically this stage, right? This stage right here. If you look at it in the days of the estrous cycle, in a 21-day cycle, we're going to start with a regression of the corpus luteum, and with a high presence of estrogen, high presence of LH, induced ovulation, then progesterone increases, right? And then we develop a follicle. Right? Either that's going to result in ovulation. This is an easier way to look at it, right? We look at here, we have our estrogen, right? Our estrogen is a dotted line. Estrogen is high, ovulation occurs, LH occurs, right? And it is going to be high at the same time the estrogen. This is during the estrus, right? The heat moment, when the cattle is in heat. Then it's going to digress, and at the same time it's digressing, progesterone is increasing, and it's either going to occur in another ovulation or a pregnancy of our cattle.